This episode is brought to you by Indie Film Hustle Academy, where filmmakers and screenwriters go to learn from top Hollywood industry professionals. Learn more at ifhacademy.com. I'd like to welcome to the show Kevin Good, man. Thank you so much for being on the show, brother.
Thank you for having me.
I appreciate it, man. I wanted you on the show because I ran across a video that you did about how you're using these really interesting techniques on creating really high production value for independent film as far as visual effects are concerned. And that's kind of my wheelhouse. I've been in post for 25 years, and I got started with my first film with over 100 visual effects shots shot on a mini DVX, Panasonic DVX 100A.
I owned one of those, yeah.
Wasn't that the greatest little camera, man?
It was the greatest little camera.
It was such like the look of it is still, I mean, it's SD, but still it was the first 24p, man. It was the first time we were like, And I still remember people like, it looks so much like film. I'm like, no, it doesn't. Not even a little. Like I look back at it now, I'm like, no, it did. But at the time, it was better than anything else around.
Everything is comparable, and compared to anything else, it looked insanely better.
Oh God, compared to like that Canon XL. Oh God, anything else 30p at the time, all mini DV was. Yeah. It was awesome. But yeah, we used Shake back in the day. Shake, and then it became Apple Shake. Shake before they abandoned such a beautiful piece of software.
I used Shake a little bit, and I've never really gotten into a node-based compositing system after that. Since then, I've been using since Apple abandoned it, I've been using After Effects mostly for like 20 years now, and it's a shame. I tried to kind of get into Blackmagic Fusion world, and it's just tough. I think there's a lot to be said for node-based compositors, but like there's also a lot to be said for decades of experience.
Of timeline compositing. My friends use Nuke. Yeah. A lot of my buddies use Nuke and Fusion, but I can't. I know how to supervise it. I just don't know how to do it. That's the one thing I don't do a lot of high-end visual effects. I wish I did, but I don't. But before we even get into all of that, man, how did you get into the film business in the first place?
First of all, thanks for having me on the show, and I'm just glad that I'm here as not a representative of some indie film distribution scheme that has gone awry, right? Because I feel like lately that's what it is, right?
I mean, look. Okay, so with that said, I'm going to say something about it, because by the time this comes out, it's going to probably be a few months since all the hoopla, but God knows in a few months I might have 3 or 4 more, 5 more episodes that are about this. It seems like I just said it yesterday in the podcast since this recording. I said yesterday, I'm like, Rome is burning, ladies and gentlemen. Rome is burning. And everyone needs to just be aware that this is happening and prepare yourselves for whatever's going to happen afterwards. But the whole infrastructure is falling around us. And even before we even get into how'd you get into the business, since you brought it up, didn't you go with Distributor for your film as well?
We did go with Distributor, and yeah, and it's heartbreaking and frustrating, and I don't know what else to say.
I know,
I'm sure other people have lost out bigger than we did. I saw Brubaker give a talk, and I talked to him afterwards, and I said, why should I go with you over Quiver or anybody else? And he said, honestly, it is a commodity business, and so I think the reason you should go with us is because I'm out here doing the outreach, and we're trying to be there for the filmmakers in a way that maybe some of the other aggregators are not.
And that's that's a true statement. They were definitely there a way for the filmmakers that no other aggregator was.
Well, the other aggregators are trying to catch up right now, right? I feel like give them time.
Give them time. They're all going to steal from us eventually. Is what you're trying to say, sir?
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean,
when you were thinking up names for your show instead of Indie Film Hustle, had you considered a cautionary tales in film distribution?
That's next. It's coming up. Look, the bottom line is, my show has, I'm now, as of this recording, I'm getting close to 400 episodes of this. Thank you so much. Of this one episode, this one podcast, not the others, and it's transformed over the years. You've kind of seen me change. You've seen the tone change. I've become a little angrier in areas. I've become things come up like Distributor and that whole fiasco, and then predatory. And then I started finding out about the Filmtrepreneur thing and everything. So I'm just kind of a mirror of what the industry is, of what's going on. And now I feel that mirror is shifting towards, I mean, do you agree? Like before, it used to be the biggest entry point or the barrier to entry to this industry was the technology. Trying to make a movie was impossible. Now making a movie is not impossible anymore. It's extremely doable, but now getting anyone to buy it, sell it, see it is the impossibility. It's very difficult.
Partially, I think making a movie. All right, here I'm just going to go off on this tangent right now.
Go for it. Go for it.
Talk about this, but making a movie, I think, is really flipping hard.
It
I have
is.
a kid now, so I'm trying to censor myself more, right? So I'm using like the Good Place version of curse words. So,
got it.
And I think everybody's like, oh my God, technology is making everything so accessible. I can go buy a Panasonic GH5 and it looks really good and people can't tell the difference. And then, my laptop, I can edit everything. So I did a little thing here. Are you aware of M. Night's The Village budget that's like online?
No, I don't. I've never seen it. I know of the movie, but I don't know the budget.
Right, sure. So the budget like leaked online, like a really detailed line item budget, and I think it's actually a really interesting thing for people to go look at because it's a $71 million movie, and normally we don't get to kind of like poke under the hood of a $71 million movie, directed by an A-list director starring Joaquin Phoenix and Bryce Dallas Howard, and lensed by Roger Deakins, and kind of see like, okay, how are they doing their thing, and what are their line items, and how does that differ from what I'm doing? And I think like filmmaking is so accessible, but I think we also all live in like this delusion bubble about how accessible it is, myself included. So for a $71 million budget, I just looked this up, right? $71 million is a lot of money, and most of that is going to stuff that costs just as much as it did in, I believe, 2003 when they made The Village, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I looked up the film and dailies for the movie cost $386,000, and then the subsequent film lab expenses cost $596,000. So under $1 million for film, and all the subsequent film processing, dailies, printing, all of those expenses is under $1 million of your $71 million budget. Great. So now the movie's down to $70 million because you're shooting it on your GH5. Right? That's still immensely expensive, and hotels cost the same thing. Joaquin Phoenix costs the same thing.
No, actually,
he costs a lot more now.
He costs a lot more now, sir. I hate to tell you.
He just skyrocketed as of Sunday, right? Carpenters cost the same thing. Costume designers cost the same thing. Locations cost
arguably
the same thing.
all of this stuff costs more. All of it costs more now because things in 2003 cost a lot less than they cost now. Period. As far as just inflation in general.
Absolutely. And so, right, and Joaquin cost $5 million for that movie.
Oh, you couldn't get he won't walk on set.
That's cheap, Joaquin.
he won't walk on set for less than 2025 at this point in the game.
Right. And so I think it is true this is more accessible than ever, but I think we're also under this delusion of going out and looking at a movie like The Village, or you could even look at a more modest movie that is maybe a little bit less elaborate in terms of sets and costumes and stars, but it's a little delusional to say like, oh, okay, I have a cheap editing system and a cheaper camera that looks really good now, and so movies are super accessible. A lot of it still isn't, and kind of taking a big look at that pie and saying, okay, technology's really done some damage on these parts, but I still have like 80% of the pie that I have to cover and get really creative about and be really ingenious to be able to bring a good story to life and give some value to the audience, I think is a responsible grown-up way of treating indie film.
Well, and I would agree with you to a certain extent because it all also depends on the story you're trying to tell. So, like the film I made at the Sundance Film Festival on the corner of Ego and Desire, that cost me about $3,000. And that, and if I would have included my flight out there, I don't even think I did. I think I was flown out, but if all the costs to get talent out there, get everybody flown in, all that stuff, and paying them. A lot of stuff was free. We had, a place to stay for free. All that kind of stuff was included, all that stuff. But that's what an indie filmmaker is supposed to do. You're supposed to figure things out as far as using the resources you have to make the film you want. So let's say all in, if I would have paid for everything, let's say the whole movie would have cost me $15,000. That's still insane as far as a cost is to make a film. So for that story, that made sense. The Village, much larger concept, with let's kill all the stars. It's all now non-union actors.
Right.
We're talking about non-union community theater actors are now in there. Everyone else stays the same. Deacons is still shooting it. Costume design is still costume design.
I don't know. I think Deacons cost almost $400,000, so I don't know if.
Which is, believe me, they should pay him a lot more.
Yeah. Well, again, his value has gone up in recent years as well. So.
Yeah, since 2003, exactly. Since 03, he's shot a couple things since then. But so anyway, but even then, it all depends on the kind of story you're trying to tell. And one of the reasons I wanted you on the show is because you were telling an ambitious story with a period piece, which is called Dinner with the Alchemist. I know we're jumping the gun here because we've gone off on a tangent, but we'll just roll with it. We'll just roll the way it is.
You're good.
But the movie that you made called Dinner with the Alchemist, when I saw the trailer and I saw some of the behind the scenes and how you were doing it, I don't see that very often anymore. I saw it a lot more when I was coming up in the early 2000s, when the technology was just breaking and filmmakers were really excited about it. Nowadays, I don't see that kind of ingenuity that I saw in what you did at a fairly high level. Because, again, I've been a VFX supervisor for a long time, so I understand what a comp is. I understand how it looks, how it's supposed to look, how you key, Roto if you need to, all those things. So when I looked at it, I'm like, okay, he's doing it good. Because there's a lot of people who do ambitious stuff, and I look at it, I'm like, did you key that out in Final Cut? That Final Cut 6? Ooh, that's probably not a good idea.
Who's using Final Cut 6?
Exactly, sir. Exactly. At least 7, for God's sakes. I was on 7 until only 4 years ago. So, but anyway, but you were able to do that. So that's why I wanted to bring you on the show. But again, you also went after something ambitious, but you were also very clever in the way you did it. And I wanted to bring this concept back to people, because you even took it to places that, and we'll talk about how you did it. Okay, so before we jump into this, because now all right, so we've all gone off on our tangent. I want to get that budget, by the way. I would love to see that budget. How did you get into the film business in the first place? And then we'll go from there.
Great. So I went to school for finance. I have a degree in business, and
Why God's green earth would you come into the film industry then, sir? What is wrong with you, sir?
And I briefly worked at this consulting firm on K Street in DC, where I was living, the area, and I was just totally miserable. Yeah. And I quit, and then I lived in my parents' place and took odd jobs for about 10 years until people started to pay me to do stuff that I enjoyed, and I started teaching Photoshop, and then teaching other photography-oriented stuff, and then filming corporate video whatevers, and then filming short films and more short films and more short films, and a few pilots, and then a pilot that I co-created got some attention, and Fox Television Studios got us to film a pilot presentation for them, and kind of just, I don't know, I just figured it out, man. That's how I got into it. I just liked it a whole lot more than the other things that I felt like I was supposed to be doing.
Good.
And so I just kept figuring it out, and I'm still trying to figure it out.
And that's something to say. Anytime I've had people on the show that I know who were doctors and left their practice to be a filmmaker, and lawyers and business people, and I always joke, why would you do something as crazy as that? But the bottom line is, if you're happy, life is too short if you're not happy, and you've got to also pay the bills. So you've got to figure it out. You've got to figure out how that revenue is going to come in. And if you want to jump into this art form, you're going to have to understand the business side of it as well. And you started to figure out how to create revenue streams that supported the filmmaking habit, because you obviously were bitten by this virus years ago, and you can't get rid of it. It's stuck with you forever. It's a lifelong virus, and it will flare up. And the only cure is being on set, basically.
Absolutely.
And it's not a cure; it's a treatment. Because once you're off set, you're depressed again. You're like, I want to go back on set.
It's like that saying, "Do what you love, and you'll just work constantly every waking moment for the rest of your life until you die." Right? That's how the saying goes.
And I think there's some money there. I'm not sure if there is or not, but if you're happy and you can eat, I guess, and you have a roof over your head, that's all that really matters.
Yeah.
So in your opinion, before we get into your movie, why do you think most independent filmmakers fail when they approach ambitious VFX shots? Because this is something that I've had immense amounts of experience with over the years, running a post house in the indie film space. And I see these I don't know if you've heard this let me see if you've heard this before. When I have an independent filmmaker who would walk into my suite and they go, look, I have this movie, I got this idea, and I have these VFX shots I need done. I'm like, okay. And I had a VFX company, so I knew what my boys could do. And they go, okay, do you know that scene in Avengers? And I go, stop right there. Just stop. Whatever you saw in the Avengers, you can't afford.
Right.
It's not going to happen. The way no. He goes, but wait. I'm like, no. Just, okay, tell me what it is. It's like, so I want this shot of the White House, and I want to fly over. And I'm like, do you have any of this footage? No, we're going to do it all in CG. Got it. Okay, so we're going to do it all in CG. And then the monster that I have written in the script. Oh, there's a monster. Yes. Have you designed this monster? No, you guys are going to do that. Okay, got it. So we're going to, and how much do you have? Well, we've got $15,000. How many shots? How many shots you got?
I thought you were gonna say $300. To be fair.
No, I'm not. I had those conversations as well. But even at $15,000, they're thinking, I've got $15,000. I could do 35, 40 shots with full CG characters and environments and comp and all that for $15,000. And this is back in the mid to late 2000s, early 2000s, and you're just like, no, man. So I want to kind of break this myth down, and also want to hear what your point of view is, why most filmmakers fail when they attempt these kind of shots.
Yeah, so I think there's like a chicken and an egg thing, right? And as indie filmmakers, we just have to reorient how we think, and that is like, you can't take a script and say, this is my script, and here's my storyboard, and here's my vision for this script, and now I'm going to go execute that. We have to do that out of order. That's how Hollywood gets to do things. They get to dream up any stupid thing they want on the page. You know, Iron Man hits its jets, flies up above Manhattan, and releases this huge blast, and all the bad guys blow up. Sorry, I just ruined like 3 of the Avengers movies there.
Spoiler alert.
They get to do that. What we have to do is like kind of think backwards and say, okay, here's the story we have to tell, but we can't be too precious about it. What are the resources that we have? Maybe those are real world resources. Maybe those are visual effects resources. Maybe we have to make the movie with sock puppets because that's like the only way that we could possibly tell this story. But we have to think backwards and say, you know, what do I have that could help tell this? And then we go ahead and we essentially change the script a lot, but keeping the essence of it, like keeping the essence of the story to accommodate what is sort of like feasible in our world, right? So to use an example out of my movie Dinner with the Alchemist, and so to kind of catch up your listeners on what's going on here, you know, we wanted to do something kind of different from indie movies. We didn't want to do, you know, a few 20-somethings sit around in their apartment and have arguments, because we've seen that movie too many times, you know, and I feel like so many indie movies end up kind of looking like Reservoir Dogs, and it's like, yeah, we saw that one. We saw that one a long time ago, and he's had a really successful career. And
it did well. I mean, he did it well back then.
He did it really well, and he already did it in the past tense. We're talking in the past tense.
He did it like super, well. Like he did it really well. Do you remember how many Pulp Fiction ripoffs there were when Pulp Fiction came out?
And it's already out. Is my point. People can already watch that. They've already had an opportunity to watch that. So we wanted to stand out a little bit, and so my wife wrote this period piece. It's set in New Orleans in the early 1900s, around the turn of the century, and it has a lot of magic and voodoo and this stuff. And some
perfect indie film. Perfect indie film.
Yeah, exactly, right. Huge cast, set in New Orleans. We don't live in New Orleans. We were living in the D.C. area at the time. Big cast, period piece, some location where we weren't, where we didn't live. A fair bit of like visual effects shots for like voodoo and magic sorcery type stuff. And, you know, we were like, okay, how can we do this? We want to set ourselves apart as an indie, but how can we tackle this thing? And so, like, for example, there would be a shot in the script, and it reads like, you know, it's morning rush hour on the docks of old New Orleans as workers are in line to get their jobs for the day or something, right? And so if you're an indie filmmaker and you read a sentence like that, it's just got to like put the fear of God into you if you know anything, right? Or you're ignorant and you're like, oh, this is cool.
Ignorance is
I'm
bliss.
just gonna go to Alex's company. I've got $15,000 for this. we'll just film everybody on green screen, and then I'll go call Alex, write him a $15,000 check, and it'll come back and it'll look great.
But wait a minute,
Right?
but also don't forget, it's actually 4 shades of green screen. So like you actually taped. No, you laugh. I had that shot come in. They taped 4 different color green screens in the background with like tape, and they shot a sword fighting. Samurai sword.
I've done so much worse, and I did so much worse in Dinner with the Alchemist. I'll have to send you a picture of some of the green screens we used for that because we were trying to do like a big set, the docks, and I didn't have enough real estate. And again, we were in Maryland. There was no like massive green screen stage we could rent out for a day, and even if there was, we wouldn't have been able to afford it. So I like set up in a parking lot and like put out all these green things on the ground. I'd painted and like hung a green. It was a mess. It was a total disaster. So, anyway, so I think like if I read this thing, the New Orleans docks, early 1900s, tons of people were. It's totally impossible, right? And even in New Orleans, we can't just go to like New Orleans and get a few people in period costumes and use a really long lens and shoot a narrow view, which is like the other way you sort of think of like problem solving in indies. It's like, cool, this 4-foot section of wall looks exactly right. So let's dig out the long lenses. Everything is going to be pointing right here. All the actors are just going to play the scene in front of this little patch. The docks that existed 100 years ago in New Orleans don't exist anymore. New Orleans is a little tourist community now, and those docks are a park. Mm-hmm. So it used to be like working class, blue collar neighborhood where there are docks, and now it's like statues and palm trees and cutely manicured grass. So what I did in this case is I went to the Library of Congress photo archive, and I started looking through pictures from New Orleans at the time period, and there were all these cool pictures of the docks. And I started thinking to myself, well, this is exactly the environment I want. Could we set the movie here in the picture, right? And you'd think like, well, Kevin, these pictures are from like 100 years ago. You sure they're going to be good enough to go into your movie that's shot with a modern camera? But the thing is, these photographs that they were doing 100 years ago were taken on glass plate negatives. So these negatives were like 8 by 10, I think. 8 inches by 10 inches. So like they had way more resolution than a modern like super 35 millimeter camera. I don't care what camera you're shooting on. These guys 100 years ago, sure, they had to work a lot harder for it, but they were rocking some really high res imagery. And so I just started looking through the Library of Congress images one after the other. Okay, could I set a scene in this image? No, it has nothing to do with my movie. Great, moving on. Could I set a scene in this image? No, not unless my characters can fly. Can I set a scene in this image? Oh, this is kind of cool. Look, you can kind of, so if they were kind of standing here and they were kind of blocked with their backs to this thing, and then the other guy walked in from this angle in between these two hay bales, now we're talking, and so we found a few different old archival photographs that if I blocked it just right, we could set the movie in the photograph. And then it's the most authentic location ever because that's like the only record we actually have of what those docks looked like 100 years ago are these photographs from the Library of Congress. And so I restored the images. We colorized them. I colorized them with the help of this guy who just does these amazing like colorizing of black and white photos that I just found online who wanted to help out. And then I just put that up as an overlay on the monitor when we were filming the actors, and just kind of wiggled the camera around until it looked like they were lined up in the right spot in the
perspective.
Yeah. So that was the like monumental task that we tackled to do some of those environments in Dinner with the Alchemist. And to get back to your question of like, what do I think is the biggest problem that people face? I mean, it's just such a tough one, but it's like, I don't want to say like ignorance because that's like insulting, but I mean
no, ignorance is too, but it's not. Look, I'm very ignorant to a lot of things in life. I don't like if you ask me how does a rocket go up? I'm like, you light the fuse and it goes up. I don't like. It's not like I'm not that ignorant, but you know what I mean. Sure. But I'm ignorant to rocket science. I'm ignorant to brain surgery. So ignorance, I don't feel as long as you're not pretending you know everything about it, then it becomes an insult.
Right. And I think it is like being realistic about what you can pull off. If you don't have somebody that's really good with the visual effects, involving them way earlier and like at a storyboard stage or at like a,
Mm-hmm.
how could we find a simpler way to tell this story? Not simpler in terms of storytelling, simpler in terms of execution, in terms of feasibility. You know, get somebody. If you're not a visual effects guru yourself, then find that person, build the tribe, reach out, find some people who really understand these things, who you've seen shots from them that convince you that they understand these things, not somebody who, you know, who claims to understand these things as soon as they get a chance to do it.
Yes. Yes.
And then, you have to, it's just like it's a planning thing. You have to work with them and say, okay, great. You want this shot of the White House. You want the camera to be flying around. Cool. Would a shot of it with the White House from the ground suffice? Does that still tell your story? All right, we can hop onto a stock video site and get some really great shots of the White House from the ground for about $40 a pop. Now we're talking. We've lost a little bit of grandeur, but we're keeping the story intact.
And
what do you need the White House?
So I don't mean to interrupt you. All right, so let's talk about the White House for a second. So let's see how we can make that White House shot work, because I want people to understand, like, so, okay, ixnay the monster, because the monster is a whole other conversation. But let's say you wanted a shot of the White House. There's so many beautifully shot drone shots of the White House, of Washington, that really make it look good from a high angle. So you could use that as maybe an introductory kind of shot where then you can cut down to the ground. And, so there's ways around it. And then with all the little tricks of the trade that we could do, you could really add
We're trying to make a monster come out of the White House.
Yeah, but we still haven't created the monster yet. So I have to get rid of guys, I'm sorry. We can use sound. You could do what Jaws did.
So here's how we do it. First of all, no, there are not a lot of really good drone shots of the White House because all of DC is a flight restricted zone since September 11th.
Okay.
So it's actually really hard to come by aerial stuff of the White House, except for stuff that was taken like really, really far away for national security reasons.
Fair enough.
So we might have to ground that shot.
Okay. Period. Okay.
Yeah, but you could ground that shot. You could do, dust elements and stuff like crashing out of the roof, rumble of the ground on the White House, cut to reverse on your characters in a medium shot, and the shadow comes up over their faces.
See? Look at that. Done. And it's Jaws.
Right?
It's Jaws. You don't see. It's much scarier. You don't see.
Much scarier if you don't see the monster. Yeah.
If you don't see it, you just see maybe like a tentacle or an arm or something quick that I've actually used shots that were, you needed to see like a monster's arm, and we literally would just draw it in Photoshop, and then it's a still image, and then we just throw a motion blur in front of it and comp it going across, and you add a nice sound effect to it. Nobody knows the difference. It's you're a magician. When you're a VFX artist, you're a magician. But what I loved about your explanation of the dock scenes is that you aren't precious with exactly what the word is saying. You're backing in to the resources you have at your disposal. So you're kind of doing a rewrite of the script in a macro level, not the micro level. The story is the story, but you're placing things differently. And by doing that, you're adding more production value. So it's the equivalent of what Robert Rodriguez did with El Mariachi. He's like, well, I've got a Mexican town, I've got guns, I've got a guitar, and I got a turtle.
Some dude who will just jump off of stuff if I ask him to.
I've got a school bus. Let's just write it all in. So
just write it all in, and he'll jump off of a school bus.
You go back and you watch that movie, you're like, how did they flew across with the pulley, and it was like, this is insane. But this is what happens when you're 20 something in 90. But so you're backing into what resources you have, but instead of backing into a Mexican town, you're now backing into, I can do this VFX shot convincingly. So now let me work around the story around the shot I can provide.
Right. And to use to quote Gareth Edwards, who did the indie breakout Monsters, which is incredible, and then went on to direct massive movies like a Star Wars movie, Rogue One.
Arguably one of the better ones since Disney purchased it.
I really enjoyed it. So Gareth Edwards talking about monsters, right? So this was the monster movie that he made on a shoestring budget, just driving around in Mexico, and it's very inspirational. He is extremely good at visual effects. He is so good in After Effects. He's so good. He has a course on FX PhD that if anybody wants to do this stuff, they should just go take, because Gareth Edwards is teaching you how to kick ass, and he's really good at it. If you don't want to take advice from a guy who got a gig directing Star Wars, then I don't know how to I don't know what to say, right? So he's extremely good, and he was talking about how he was going through all these shots on monsters and how he would knock out 2-3 visual effects a day. This is somebody who's great at what he does, and a lot of those were, there needs to be smoke going out of the horizon, or they pass by a burned out car or tank, or a fighter jet goes overhead, or all these things that he knows very well because he knows how to do this stuff are simpler visual effects shots. Mm-hmm. And then there's a shot of the monster. It's a monster movie, and you finally see the monster. Spoiler alert! Sorry, the movie's called Monsters. So, but he said the monster shot. The first time he had to do a monster shot, I forget. He said it took him like a month or two. Right, and it's just like a completely different world. Like, here, we're going to see this thing in all its glory. Okay, so if somebody who's like a total pro who does this full-time professionally is going to take a month or two to pull off one shot on something, and then it's going to take just a few hours to pull off another shot, you need to know that difference as a director, or as a filmmaker, period, and not kind of be naive about that. And I think that's part of that, like, self-education thing of like, okay, this is a set of tools I have in my tool bag, and this other thing here where I actually want to see the monster in full view busting out of the roof of the White House, I either got to figure out a creative way around that, or I got to go raise another $1 million.
Right. And then you have to put your business hat on and go, if I add another $1 million, am I going to get that $1 million back in sales?
And is showing the monster coming out of the White House the right way to spend that?
And that was the other thing, with everything I've talked about by being a filmtrepreneur and being the entrepreneurial filmmaker, you have to. I always tell people, like, look, I know you want the crane shot, but the crane is going to cost you another $4,000 to rent that techno crane today. Do you need that shot, and what's the ROI of the techno crane? Like, are you going to get that $5,000 back in sales, or can you do it with a jib arm? Can you do it with a drone? Can you do it with a Steadicam or a gimbal or something more affordable? Is it as cool? No, it's not your Scorsese shot. Absolutely. I'm sorry, but he's playing with a different tool set than we are. So you have to.
And he doesn't have to worry about that. Yeah.
No, obviously, we all saw The Irishman. That's what happens when you give Martin Scorsese a blank check. I don't think he's ever had that in his entire career. And he's like, you know what? I think we're just going to bring back every old actor I've ever worked with, and we're just going to make them young. Screw it. That's it. And they just, like, because originally I was only supposed to be like 150, and it ended up like being 210, 220 or something.
Was it really? That's
yeah,
amazing.
It was. No, they gave him a blank check. It's Netflix. Netflix just gave him a blank check. And it worked. I mean, I don't know how. I think it was fairly successful for Netflix, and definitely got a lot of people talking.
They'll never tell us.
But I don't think Marty's getting that check again. I don't think.
Even they got lots of shots of him sitting at the Oscars, and he didn't win anything, but they got nominated for a ton of stuff, and they definitely got like a huge level of prestige out of that.
Oh, yeah, and everybody was talking about The Irishman was on everyone's lips for weeks. Kind of like The Mandalorian was when it was out. Like, it was like Irishman. It was like, and they got a lot of press out of it, and it did work. And also, I think from what I heard, Netflix's plans are, and also Amazon's plans is, they do films like that so they can attract other creators of that magnitude to go, well, they gave Marty $200 million. I just need $100 million and I get free reign. Oh yeah, where do I sign up?
Right. You might not want to, if you're a big name director, you might not want to sign on to do something for Netflix, but what are you better than Martin Scorsese?
Right.
So it kind of opens that gate.
Or you want to because you're tired of, the studios, stopping you from being creative. And Netflix, from my understanding, pretty much lets, even the smallest films, they don't really interfere too much on the creative standpoint to a certain extent, as long as you're hitting those algorithm markers that they're looking for. But if you're Martin Scorsese, it doesn't really matter. So. Right. It's a very interesting world. I think we've gone completely on a tangent with Martin Scorsese.
No, it's okay. But you're talking about like the ROI thing and like, is the Technocrane worth it? And I think it's like, so I think it's important to keep that in mind and keep in mind that sometimes the answer is yes. Sometimes the whole story depends on that Technocrane.
Absolutely.
You need that Technocrane. That's the thing. But you've got to pick your battles. And I think a lot of the quality issues that I see on indie film, my own included, are maybe not like picking the right battles. Like I don't even remember how many times I've had arguments with people over getting like fancy lenses. Like I'm going to rent a set of Cooks for my short film. And it's like,
no one's going to know.
You're making a few $1,000 short film.
No one's
you
gonna
really think that this expensive lens rental, and that is, so if we think of, your movie budget is this pie, and let's say 20% of that pie is like way smaller now because of technology. So that's the camera, film stock, forget about it, editing systems. 20% of that pie has shrunk massively. And as I was talking about before, when we were talking about The Village, the other 80% of that pie is largely intact. Hotel costs haven't gone down. If you need to fly people around,
Mm-hmm.
And so, looking at that pie and saying, where can I get the most gains here? Is throwing a bit of money at a fancier lens rather than a cheaper lens the place that's going to give me the most gains in this pie? And it's like, no, it's not. The cameras are already really good and really cheap. Stop worrying about your damn camera. And like the amount of people that like insist, we should film this on an Alexa 65. Let's go rent one. What are you talking about, man?
Yeah. And let's not even talk about workflow. Can you handle the workflow of an Alexa 65? Right. That's a whole other conversation.
Right. Go get a Panasonic GH or a Blackmagic Ursa Mini 2. They're whatever. They're great cameras. And then focus on the rest of your pie, and you have to say, like, where am I getting the biggest gains, right? And so sure, maybe those fancy lenses are giving you 0.5% gain over the cheaper lenses option, right? You can't get better than 0.5% gain somewhere else in that whole pie. You can't like spend a little bit more money on your production design or your set, or have an extra day of shooting so you can take your time and really get all that coverage. Get all the coverage you want. So,
preach.
So this is just a warning to anyone else who asks me about renting Cook lenses that I'm just going to go nuclear and start screaming at you. That's basically
look, I love Cook lenses. I love Zeiss lenses. They all have their own thing. They're all great. They're fantastic. I've shot with all of them in my career. But when I shot my last film, I shot it on a Sigma 18-35 photo lens.
Yeah.
It's
sitting right next to me here. This is my Tamron 24-70 photo lens that I've shot more stuff on than I care to mention. I have this in both Canon and Nikon mount because I use it so much.
And it's a great, and that lens specifically, it's an art lens. It's called the art lens. That art lens, I think it cost me like $500 or $600 5 years ago, and I've shot everything. I shoot everything with it, no one's gonna care. And no one was sitting there watching my movie in a theater and going, God, was that a Sigma? That looks like a Sigma.
Did you guys notice that chromatic aberration in the upper right corner of the frame?
Did you see that's not?
It's absurd, right?
It's absurd, but that's where filmmakers start their egos get the best of them. I'm guilty of this early in my career as well. Like because you assume that like if Deacon shoots with a Cook, and I shoot
on an Alexa 65,
and I shoot with an Alexa 65 with a Cook, I guess I'm going to be my stuff's going to look as good as when Deacon shoots it. No. Just because I have a paintbrush doesn't make me Picasso. It doesn't matter. It's about
and that's the ultimate analogy, right? I'll take Picasso with the world's crappiest paintbrush, or just his finger. Any day over me with the best paintbrush that you can find.
It is not the plunger, sir. It is the plumber.
I don't know if I agree with that one. Sure.
Isn't it crazy? Isn't it crazy that we're the only industry that I know of? It's like when you hire a plumber and they show up to fix the job, you go, what brand of plunger is that? Is that an Alexa plumber? Is that a red plunger? No, no one cares. It's a tool. Do your job. And now, but the whole marketing and everything like that with gear, with the whole gear porn situation, filmmakers get caught up in that. And I feel that a lot of times it's an excuse to either not move forward, because a lot of people stay stagnant until they get the Alexa 65. And then by the time they go on set, they're like, oh, what do you mean I only have one day to shoot the feature? Well, that's all the money you have. If you would have shot it on a Blackmagic with a Sigma art lens, you could have shot for 6 days.
And everyone would have thought it looked the same as the other thing, except for like
go ahead.
Two people would have noticed the difference, and it just would have been like, them studying it. Two DPs out there would have been like, huh, Yeah, I think this looks like one of those Sigma art lenses. Two people. That's it.
Is the story good? No one cares. If the story's good, that's all that matters. No one cares about what you shoot it on. No one cares about your lenses. Is it clean? Does it look good? Does it sound good?
Absolutely.
That's much more important.
We do see a huge correlation, though. It's not like in sympathy to indie filmmakers, there's a huge correlation between companies that are making stuff and that can profit from that stuff they're making, and therefore are advertising the hell out of it, and what people obsess over. So there are camera manufacturers and lens manufacturers, and they need to sell new Alexas to somebody, right? And Blackmagic keeps coming out with a new camera every week, and they need to sell it. And they're pushing it and showing you all this beautiful imagery, and that has an effect. All that advertising has an effect. There's no like big location scout company out there, right? Like
there's a new location every week.
Yeah, look at this new location in our location scout, right? And so you don't get that same little advertising, whatever dopamine hit thing that is, that I need that coveted thing. There's no like production design megalopoly out there being like, look at our production designs. This is what will make you a real filmmaker.
The latest props.
Yeah. But there's a lot of money pushing all the new tech and all the new gear, and you know, from lenses to cameras to monitors and post-production tools. There's a lot of money behind that, and they keep developing new stuff, and they keep needing to sell it. So that has a psychological effect on you and me.
Yeah, and I talked to a filmmaker the other day that just shot their feature on the Red One. They bought a Red One for like, I don't know, $2,000, and they shot it on. It was 4K. It's a beautiful camera. It shoots beautiful imagery. And
you mean like the Lord of the Rings movies? Right. Or the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man movies?
Or Che? Or any of these?
Were great.
Or the Ocean's 11 films? Are those like... was that not good enough for you? But that's that's the thing. Like people, like when 35 was around, 35 was always around. It's 35, everything always looked good, and there was just a little bit of change in the technology for the most part. But now every other day, do you need 8K? Do you need 10K? Do you need 15K? I need to shoot my 2-minute short on 10K, because if not, I won't be able to zoom in. Well, just frame it right the first time, dude. If you got the money, then God bless you. Shoot the latest 10K camera if you want to. But if not, what's the point? Like I shot my film, that last film I shot 1080p. I shot it with a pocket. I shot it with a 1080p pocket camera, Blackmagic.
I got one of those sitting right here.
They're the great camera. The great little cameras. And it worked for the kind of story I was trying to tell. I wanted that kind of Super 16 look to it, and it worked great. Right. You know, so it's all depending on picking the right tool for the right camera, and not to get caught up on it. You know, I know we've gone off on a tangent on gear porn a little bit, but it all kind of works into the concept of how to get the most bang out of your buck, and not to allow marketing, not to allow ignorance to derail your filmmaking dreams, if you will.
Right. And I think going back to the creature coming out of the White House, it's like we can't, as indies, we just can't compete with Hollywood on spending money.
No.
And so if you're trying to do that, you're losing a losing battle. And I think one of the things, and we did this with Dinner with the Alchemist, and it's something that I try to do with each of my projects, is say, like, what are we trying to do here that, you know, what kind of a story are we trying to tell that Hollywood can't because they're too busy making Avengers movies, you know? And unfortunately, you know, I do see a lot of indies also where it's like, oh yeah, this is like, you know, this is like Avengers, but really cheap and indie. This is like Lord of the Rings, but it's like if it was indie and
sock puppets.
Yeah.
I want to see
Thrones, but with sock puppets.
I do want to see. I mean, I do want to see all those movies in sock puppets. Is there anyone's out there? I think that is a niche, a niche audience. That if you made Avengers in sock puppets, you could get away with.
That's a hit YouTube channel idea.
Oh, that's just so huge. It's huge. It's monster. You could create an entire channel just around sock puppet reenactments.
I'm too busy. You're too busy. But any listeners out there, go do that. We'll watch it.
We'll definitely watch it, and I'll promote it. Oh please, somebody go out there, do sock puppet Avengers. Okay, can you imagine? And if you could throw some real visual effects in there, oh my God, that would be amazing. Can you imagine sock puppets with high-end visual effects?
That'd be incredible.
That would be incredible. That's free for anybody out there listening. Please take
Absolutely.
it. Take it.
I just want to see it.
Yes, please. Please don't send us any money. Just make it. That's our payment. Now, there was a shot that you did in Dinner with the Alchemist, which was really inventive, where establishing shots add so much production value to a movie. And that's something that indies a lot of times don't even think about. They just go from interior to interior to interior to maybe an exterior of a house to interior, and they don't take the time to do a big establishing shot, because the big establishing shots generally are more expensive. You got to have more control, all that kind of stuff. And what you did with the pictures, can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. So we actually and when I say don't be Hollywood in making a movie, I mean don't try to compete with them on spending money. But in other ways, we really need to be Hollywood, and we need to be smarter about things. And there are things that I see that indie filmmakers don't do. And one of those is test audiences. I don't know why indie filmmakers don't do test audiences the same way Hollywood does. Hollywood does them for all their big movies, and for a reason. It's really important after you've sat with something for like probably a couple years and you can't see the forest for the trees, to get some new input and feedback from some fresh people that have never seen it before. And so we did focus groups and tested Dinner with the Alchemist as the edit was coming together. As soon as we had a full edit, we put it in front of some people that had never seen any of it. Re-edit for a few months, do the same thing again. Re-edit for a few months, do the same thing again. And they came back saying like, oh, well, yeah, it kind of feels claustrophobic, this, that, and the other. Basically, it needed establishing shots, right? Unfortunately, it was like a period piece written about this New Orleans at the turn of the century, and I was like, how in the hell am I going to do establishing shots? I just don't know what to do here. And so again, we went back to the Library of Congress photo archive, and I was just looking through all these shots, and there were some kind of cool shots of the city, like from a rooftop, of the old skyline of New Orleans 100 years ago. But they were all like really boxy because of the aspect ratio of those cameras. But I noticed in the pictures that there were a few pictures that had overlap. Like this dude had stood on a rooftop and actually filmed, like taken panoramic photographs. So sure enough, I downloaded these from the Library of Congress, stitched them in Photoshop, and actually made a panorama from these stills that this dude 114 years ago had taken, who had no idea that a panorama or Photoshop would ever subsequently exist. Mm-hmm. But thankfully, he shot them perfectly for a panorama with just the right amount of overlap. And then again, we colorized it, and so then I could build a camera move in that was kind of sweeping across the panorama. And
because it was so high res. Because it was so high res.
Because it was so high res, and because I had stitched it, so now it was like super high res, you know. So each one of those was high res. Now it was like an insane res. I could have done like a crash zoom in onto one of the smokestacks, you know. And then we added like some digital elements, like smoke coming up out of the smokestacks, and like a flock of birds and all that stuff to give motion to the scene. And it's great. It's one of the best things. We were at a film festival. Was Orlando. We were at the Orlando Film Festival with a movie. And I'm a nervous watcher, so I used the bathroom like 3 times during the course of the movie, because as we were sitting there watching the movie, my bladder couldn't take the nerves of sitting with audiences and watching my work. Yep. So I keep running to the bathroom, and then on one time when I ran to the bathroom, that shot came up, and I was randomly walking past this couple that, you know, strangers at the Orlando Film Festival, and they're like, "Ooh, that's really beautiful," they said. And it was like, that's it. That's why I spent a week working on that. Yeah, so I could overhear some strangers in a darkened theater looking at it on the big screen and hear them gasp when they saw it. I mean, it's like, if that's not that dopamine hit that's going to make me do something stupid like go make another movie, I don't know what is.
Tell me about it. But can you give any advice to filmmakers who don't have a VFX company like I do, or the VFX prowess that you do, to achieve these films? Because I know a lot of filmmakers just don't understand post, let alone high-end visual effects, or how it's done, or how it's shot, or what it costs. Any tips on how, you know, just normal filmmakers who don't have these tools in their toolbox can achieve these shots?
I mean, yeah, watch lots of YouTube. You just have to like educate yourself. And so if you can find somebody executing something that you want to do, if you're trying to do like simpler stuff, if you're trying to do muzzle flashes, You type that in After Effects muzzle flashes into YouTube, and not only are you going to not have like really crappy looking overlay muzzle flashes, you're going to have some people that are really showing you how to do a really good job on it, where you have a shell casing popping out and the person's face is lighting up from the flash and you're getting a good composite out of it. So just educate yourself. If you can't find somebody doing a YouTube tutorial on it, chances are it's really complicated.
Right.
And then at that point, I think you do just need to loop somebody else in. Find an Alex Ferrari or a Kevin Good and talk to them about it. Try to, a lot goes into it. And the worst thing you can do is just go shoot a bunch of people in front of a green screen and try to figure it out later. Like you have to.
You mean fix it in post? You mean fix it in post?
Yeah. Well, I mean, by some nature, like visual effects is like creating it in post, right? But you can't create it in post if you don't have a plan, if you don't know what you're shooting, Right. So
it's all about the ingredients. If the ingredients aren't good, you really can't cook it. You gotta have good ingredients, and that's what shooting those plates are, and shooting the proper elements are, and then you can composite it. But when you have a blue screen mixed with a green screen background, and the guy is wearing green and blue,
right.
You've seen those memes, right? Like there's a soccer guy in a green uniform on a green screen. You can barely see him, and they're like,
I don't know how they did. I watched Guardians of the Galaxy, and they have one character that's green and one character that's blue, and I'm like, man, this must suck to work on in post. You guys really did a movie with a green character and a blue character, and they're siblings, and they talk to each other all the time on screen at the same time.
That must be interesting. That must be. But when you have ILM, you're good. They figure it out.
Then all bets are off. Then you can just film somebody on whatever, and then you hand it to the guy and write them millions of dollars of checks, and they'll figure it out.
I have a buddy of mine who worked on Lord of the Rings. He worked on the Hobbit films. And he told me...
Oh, those are terrible. They were shot on a Red 1.
I know.
The Hobbit films, those were newer. That
was shot at 60 frame. They were 60 frame, exactly.
Those are shot on the Epics, yes.
The Epics.
Fine, that's acceptable.
Yeah, but that's only a 4K Epic, so honestly, it's...
Garbage,
honestly. So what he told me was that Peter doesn't really care about what it takes in post, because he just has Weta. So he just just roto it.
Sure.
So everything was rotoed. Like they would just roto all the characters out. And if you don't know if anyone listening doesn't understand what a rotoscope is, it's the equivalent of taking a piece of paper and cutting around the lines around like yourself, and then comping it in or pulling them out and then cleaning up the background. And
then doing that at 24 frames per second or 60 if you're doing the Hobbit. So it's basically like the sweatshop labor of visual effects.
It very much so, and it is so time consuming and so brutal, but he did just tons of it, and there was just roto guys. There's full teams of roto guys doing that. So you got Hobbit money, you knock yourself out, do what you got to do, but be careful because it could turn into cats.
If you run out of time, then it turns into cats.
All right. So real quick, before we finish up, I have to talk to you about Cats, man. So
I have not gotten a chance to see it yet. Because of all the negative buzz. I really want to see it.
I can't. And I've talked about Cats already a few times on the show. I haven't seen it yet. I'm dying to see it. And I respect the filmmakers who made it and everything, but this happens once in a generation. A studio does such a colossal failure at all levels, creative, visual, like, you're talking about like Ishtar, Heaven's Gate, Glitter, like some of the biggest bombs. And even those were all nothing compared to Cats, because Cats on paper had everything going for it. One of the biggest Broadway hits of all time, Oscar-winning director, Oscar-winning writer, biggest music stars around, Oscar-winning actors behind this, like visual effect, huge visual. Right. They had it on paper, completely made sense, and then this colossal breakdown of what it turned into. That the story didn't work on screen. It's not a cinematic story. The visual effects. The best tweet I ever heard, as far as a review of Cats, was it's so good. Cats is the worst thing to happen to cats since dogs. It's so bad. Go ahead.
I think you have like, and you see this with movies, you see like these tight deadlines and everybody,
Yep.
particularly with visual effects, like so many of the big tentpole movies now are just visual effects experiments where it's like call them live action is even a stretch.
Mm-hmm.
And you kind of always see these things come along, and then you tell the war stories about how they almost didn't come together, but they always kind of seem to come together, and they always kind of seem to make deadline. And it's like,
yeah, oh yeah,
or not once in a while.
And by the way, I don't blame the VFX team at all for they just didn't have the time. And also, from what I understood, there was just so many mixed messages. It was like by committee. There was like. And like, look, I have a lot of people who work at the big VFX guys that I know, at big VFX studios. So I understand these ridiculous deadlines they put up that are insane. But it's you don't go back and just change everything with 3 months left, and you don't continuously change and change and change and change and change. And that's what happened to them, to the point where they released the movie and what's her name? Judi Dench
had her hand showing through.
Her hand with a ring on, and it just didn't get comped, and it
didn't get there.
Can you understand that? I mean, you and I both been in the business. I've delivered just a lot of features in my life. I've never delivered a film with a VFX that how many eyes had to have seen that print? How many people watched that before it got sent out to theaters?
Yeah, but how sleep deprived and how big of a hurry were every one of those eyes in?
Exactly.
And
yeah,
so
it's insane. Yeah. So it is a cautionary tale for filmmakers, even in the indie level, when you throw these ridiculous timelines. You're like, well, I need to meet Sundance's deadline, or I need to meet South by Southwest's deadline, or I need to, and you rush and you rush and you rush. It's obviously not as big of a risk as it is putting out a $100 million movie at Christmas. With missing visual effects, but it does hurt, and you can burn through a lot of money very quickly that way. Yeah.
I've been working on this is the thing that I should be slightly ashamed to say, but I've been working on a web series that's all shot on green screen. Every shot. We started principal photography in September of 2009.
Wow.
I'm still working on it. Yeah. So when I finish this call with you, I'm going to open up After Effects and keep compositing.
Jesus Christ. Okay, off air, we're going to have a session, man. We're going to have a little. We're going to have a little. Yeah, I'm just going to throw some intervention at you because this is a problem. Because you've made a feature or two between that time.
Yeah, I've made a feature. I've shot a few. I've held down a life since then, and it can really get bloated. And even somebody who like understands it well, like originally I was kind of like, oh, this will be like this really cartoony thing with really bad green screen. It'll be hysterical. And then like 10 years later, I'm like, or it could look kind of cool.
Oh,
let me just work on this a little bit more.
Oh no! And then you're gonna wake up and you're gonna be 70.
Yeah, and then I'll finally release it.
And all the actors will have already passed on.
Yeah.
It's just, it is what it is.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a web series, too. What the hell am I going to do with a web series?
So first of all, stop calling it a web series. You can't call it a web series. You have to call it a streaming series.
You go.
I'm not joking about that. That is streaming. You can't, if you call it a web series, the second you said web series, what do you think of? Crackle. All those old bad web series that came out when the internet first showed up. If you call streaming series, you think of Stranger Things. You think of The Mandalorian.
You have to forgive some of my language. When I made this, when I started making
the web series,
computers didn't exist yet. It was just a flip book that I was.
No, you were comping in DOS, sir. You were comping in DOS.
No, seriously, YouTube. I don't think YouTube existed. Did YouTube?
Yes, it did.
Yeah, YouTube existed,
205,
but not by much. When did YouTube
05,
start?
05. 04 or 05 is when it came out, because that's when I jumped on YouTube and put up some of my visual effects tutorials back in the day. I put them up on there, and they're still there for my film.
Did you do one on muzzle flashes?
Of course I did. I did it. But I was doing muzzle flashes before muzzle flashes were it was 2005, so there was no prepackaged muzzle flash anywhere.
Right.
And we did it in shake. We did reflections off the face. We actually had practical smoke that came out of the airsoft guns, and then the muzzle flashes, every single one changed. So it was because we had a script. We'd use scripts in Shake, so it was just kind of like this script that every single time it moved, the parameter moved on it. So it was never the same muzzle flash twice.
Great.
So we did all of that stuff back in 2004. And that VFX artist, who's my buddy, he went on to work for Tippett, so he's doing okay.
Great.
I was very lucky with my VFX team. Those two guys that worked on that first film have gone on to work on billion-dollar projects.
Yeah.
So I always tell them I'm still waiting for my 10%, because I launched them, I discovered them. But
that's good.
Let me ask you a few questions that I ask all my guests, sir. What advice would you give a filmmaker wanting to break into the business today?
My biggest piece of advice that I give for that is you got to find the day job that supports it. So I do television commercials. You spend so much of your life working that if you're working in a cafe, if you're working as a barista or driving an Uber or something else because it's just your side hustle, you're not working those muscles that you need to work. So my day job, quote unquote, I'm going on set, I'm meeting new crews, I'm traveling around the country and shooting, and I'm editing, and I'm learning all the post-production tools, and I'm using After Effects, and we're delivering to stations and all that jazz. So it takes some work to get there, but if you're working 40 hours a week or realistically more, like most people, you need that time to be time where you're also building your useful tool set and making yourself more valuable for the stuff you want to be doing.
So make your side hustle inside your industry is basically what you're saying.
Yeah, make your side hustle something that can help that skill set along. Just help it push that skill set along, because you got to be good.
Yes, absolutely. Now, what is the lesson that took you the longest to learn, whether in the film business or in life?
The lesson that took me the longest to learn, I haven't learned it yet, but that I can't do everything myself, and I need to quit with the feature bloat. Like the series that I started filming in 2009, it's a streaming
done.
series.
It's almost done.
It's a streaming series.
It is, which is fantastic, but it's almost done.
Yeah.
Any day now.
Almost done any day now. So you really gotta build the tribe. You got to build the tribe so you can have that support and you can have the people around you that are gonna help you put things out. When I was doing my web show, Weapons of Mass Production, my YouTube show where I would review cameras and stuff, it was kind of agonizing because it took up all my time and I couldn't do anything else. But at the same time, I was publishing something every couple of weeks that was getting a lot of viewership and a lot of feedback, and just being in that mode of put stuff out the door, man, put stuff out the door. And so I still have trouble with that because, I'm on my 11th year working on one project, and that's not a realistic time frame.
What are you, Kubrick?
For anyone that is sane.
What are you, Kubrick? Come on, man. I mean, the VFX files, they've had to have changed. How many versions of After Effects?
How many versions of After Effects have I gone through? Yeah. And then you see me getting better. And I was just talking about this morning with my brother, where you see the first episode and it's it just looks stupid, right? It looks like somebody standing on a green screen and this poorly rendered CG background behind them. And then you look at the episode I'm working on now, and it's just so moody and intense and fun looking. And it's you just see this progression. So if anybody can choke down these early episodes, there's really a treat in them, at the end, because it just continues to get better. But
we are going to have an intervention after I stop recording. What is the biggest fear you had to overcome to make your very first film?
Biggest fear to make very first film. I'm going to go with very first feature here. Yeah. Biggest fear. Just letting everybody down. It's you're so overextended and you've pulled in so many favors from so many people. And so we went to New Orleans to shoot just for a few days, and we aren't locals, and we had to fly. Half of our budget was just for these couple days of shooting some exteriors around the French Quarter, because travel, hotel, hiring some local crew in New Orleans, all that stuff. So I think I just felt I've asked people to do so much and put in so many long hours and work for so little and it all might just not come together. This might be the thing I'm talking to people about that I've been working on for 11 years from now, So I don't know, letting people down so that it was just, I don't know. I just wanted to be able to have a premiere and put a movie out that didn't suck. And thankfully we did, but
I know the feeling.
yeah, you're really not sure that's going to happen until the very, very, very end. Up until then, it might all just be a waste of time and money.
Now, what are 3 of your favorite films of all time?
3 of my favorite films of all time. Well, the thing that popped into my head immediately was Galaxy Quest.
Oh, so good. So good. So good. I can't wait to see that documentary.
Oh, yeah. I can't wait to see it. I saw it. They did at that theater in Santa Monica.
Yeah.
They did, when Alan Rickman passed away, they did a in memoriam screening of a bunch of his films. So they had Galaxy Quest with the writer and director, and that was great. So Galaxy Quest, what else? I'm a Star Wars kid. I grew up with the original Star Wars, and that was just really formative for me. And then what's another fun movie that I really love? Confessions of a Dangerous Mind is the other one that popped into my head.
That's a really good movie.
That's my underrated category.
Nobody
talks about it. Nobody.
And that's George Clooney who directed.
George Clooney directed it, starring Sam Rockwell, and it's just one of those movies that kind of slipped by, and
it did really good. And I remember he did some really kind of ballsy directing moves in that. Yep. He would change the sets and he all in one shot, one take. He did some really cool stuff in that movie, and Sam Rockwell was just amazing in that.
Yeah, he's had an okay career since then too.
He's been all right. He's been doing all right. Yeah. I just saw him in Jojo Rabbit. He was great in Jojo Rabbit.
I haven't seen that yet.
It's so good. All right, so where can people find you and the work you're doing?
I think Kevin Be Good on Twitter is where I'm kind of most active. And then just look for Dinner with the Alchemist. We were with this aggregator called Distribber. They've gone the way of the dodo, and so we're trying to figure out what the new home for it is, but it's probably directly through Amazon, and so we'll be back up soon. It's just life gets in the way of those things. So,
all right, yeah. Kevin, man, it is. I know we could talk for about another 2 or 3 hours about VFX and the
anytime
and dealing with filmmakers and all that kind of great stuff with VFX. But I do appreciate you coming on, and hopefully this has been an educational and inspiring story for a lot of filmmakers that you can go out and do it. You got to think differently. You can't try to compete with Hollywood with a $5 budget. It's kind of like I use the example of Goliath, David versus Goliath. Like if you want to fight Goliath on Goliath's terms, you're going to lose. But if you pick up a stone and throw it between his eyes, you got a fighting chance.
Absolutely.
So thanks again for being on the show, brother.